They say they want to make Europe great again. Right-wing party leaders in Hungary, Poland and Italy say they want to form a new alliance. They're due to meet again this month to discuss their next moves. What could it mean for European politics and the EU? This is Roundtable. Hello, I'm Shuli Ghosh. They're seen by many as anti-EU disruptors, and now they're getting together to discuss forming a new bloc in the European Parliament. Is this a new political force to be reckoned with? Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orbán, Polish leader Mateusz Morawiecki, and Italian Lega Party leader Matteo Salvini say their mission is to make Europe great again. The leaders met in Budapest last month to discuss the establishment of a new conservative European alliance.
Today is the first stop on a long road. We have agreed on a few things. We have talked a lot about our common values. It is clear that apart from the Atlantic commitment, we represent the values of liberty, dignity, Christianity, family and national sovereignty.
But will those shared values be enough? Researchers at the London School of Economics reckon there are many differences for them to overcome before they can create a potent EU-wide alliance, including their approach to economic challenges and their stance on Russia. So can these European right-wing parties boost their power in Brussels? And are they a threat to the EU itself? Joining us on Roundtable in Budapest, Andras Laszlo, political advisor to Fidesz. In Brussels, Doru Frantescu, EU affairs expert and co-founder of Vote Watch Europe. And in Paris, Pawel Zerka, policy fellow at the European Council on Foreign Relations. Gentlemen, good to have all of you with me. Andras, let me start with you, because Viktor Orbán says this new coalition will make Europe great again. What does it want to change? Why is it so dissatisfied with Brussels?
I think the view about the European Union is not unique, not united at a European level. There's big differences politically on what the left wants the European Union to be and what the future should be of the European Union. And there's an alternative view which puts more emphasis on national sovereignty, on Christian values, on family values. And obviously that's why also the Future of Europe debate was recently launched by the European Union to involve citizens to see where we want to see European Union a few years from now.
Can I just ask, is Mr. Orbán pushing this new alliance because basically Fidesz was pretty much forced out of the European People's Party, which is the biggest political group in the European Parliament?
No, I believe there's more like a lack of representation for millions of European citizens who voted based on their conservative or Christian values. And the EPP was moving gradually towards the center and even to the left on some of the issues. Even in the previous European parliamentary cycle, there was a grand coalition with the Socialist group in the European Parliament. And also since the 2019 European elections, the EPP is basically firmly committed to cooperation with leftist groups from the European Parliament and ignoring the other two right-wing groups.
Right.
We believe that this is a wrong path for the EPP. We've voiced this concern on several occasions and also regarding several policy areas and concrete issues. But at some point, you must make a decision, is this really the direction you're going with? And if there's no sign from the other side that they are willing to represent the values which I just stated, then you might look for other partners. And this is what's happening right now.
All right, well, let's talk about values and representation. Doru, what are your thoughts on this? Because clearly those three countries, Hungary, Poland, Italy, they feel they have shared grievances over the direction that Brussels is moving in.
Yeah, I think that's a very good point. We have to take into account that these parties who have made this alliance are not just ordinary parties. They are parties who have experience in government and which are quite representative of very large segments of the population in their countries. So it is not just the parties themselves, but it is also the electorate that they represent, which seems to share the view that the interests of their countries are not fully represented in Brussels. And we must take into account the geography of this alliance, and that is a representation of parties and countries from Central and Eastern Europe and the south of Europe, which more broadly, and there are also other countries which seem to indicate a potential cleavage that we're seeing, a geographical cleavage between Northwestern Europe on the other hand, whose countries are more influential in Brussels, and the East and the South on the other hand, who feels that it's a bit left behind, also on the background of the economic crisis and the social crisis that has followed.
So by forming this sort of more conservative alliance, do these countries feel that they can shape the future direction of the EU?
I think they feel they will have an influence. Obviously, certainly they don't have enough strength on their own to be able to shape the future of the European Union as such. They will need allies. They will need to engage in negotiation, in horse trading with the other parties, with the other countries. But if they felt that they can do it better through forming their own alliances rather than being part of the mainstream European politics, that's their choice. We'll see whether this is the best choice or not.
Okay, Pawel, how does forming an alliance benefit the leaders, and what do you think about this concept of these core values which the leaders believe should be the main focus of the EU?
Most of all, I don't think that we should be talking about the alliance as of yet, because so far we have had a meeting of the three leaders. They are supposed to meet again in Warsaw, apparently, within the next couple of weeks. I believe that all of the three need to be able to show to their voters that they are again part of a momentum, that they can have an influence on EU affairs. They have things in common, such as the fact that they are at the government, as opposed to many or most of other radical right parties. But still, I don't see the alliance coming easily.
Let's listen to Matteo Salvini, who says the new alliance will uphold the core values of freedom, family, Christianity and sovereignty in the European Union.
Noi chiediamo più Europa.
We are calling for more Europe in terms of defence of borders, defence of lives. The problem is not how to redistribute the problems of a few countries at the European level. The problem is how to create a common European force to defend the borders of Europe.
Andreas, let me come to you off the back of that. Those values that you were talking about, representation, actually, don't those values put such a conservative alliance, if it comes together, at odds with the more liberal values of other member states?
Depends what you mean by liberal values, because they have changed.
Well, for example, LGBTQ rights or immigration, abortion.
I think there's a considerable number of European citizens who do like our pro-family policies, which we have enacted over the last 10 or 11 years now. I think this has resonated a lot internationally. And I think there's an overrepresentation of LGBTQ rights and movements and lobby at European level. And in fact, most of European citizens live in traditional households and families, and they want to be represented as well, and they want to be supported as well. This was also an issue which came up a few years ago as a consequence of the immigration crisis in Europe. Which was about a lot of the leftists and liberals said that, oh, we need immigration because of a declining demographic trend in the European Union, which is true, I believe, without exception to all member states of the EU. And we said the opposite, that, well, that's why we have family policy. We want to support families, we want to support a society which deems it valuable to have children and to pass on the heritage we have, Christian values, for example, on which Europe is based and on which Europe has become successful and valuable.
Well, let's talk about whether such an alliance, I know they're still talking about it, but would it be workable? Because Pawel's already said that, there are some differences to overcome. Andras, you talked about immigration there, but actually free movement of workers is one thing that may disunite those three partners. Doru, what do you think? Is this alliance workable? Because there are some differences between the policies of Hungary, Poland and Italy, which might come between them.
Exactly. There are similarities and there are differences in the positions of the three partners. Among the differences, as you rightly mentioned, there is also the different view of the Schengen space and the freedom of movement of workers inside the EU. So we're not talking about external immigration, so migration coming from third countries where they agree. But when it comes to migration intra-EU, then there are disagreements. The League in Italy has been traditionally very skeptical of a very open Schengen space, and it has pushed back as much as possible immigration from Eastern Europe, where the other two countries are coming from. So let's see if they can manage to accommodate this difference. And then, of course, there are other differences, the views vis-a-vis the foreign policy towards Russia, where we've just seen a development in this respect. And we've seen that there are nuances in the position. Let's not say dramatic differences, but certainly nuances. And that's something that they have to come together on as well. And there is also the issue of the distribution of the European funding. The three agree that the EU should have a stronger European budget, but there are disagreements on how the money should be distributed to the member states, whereas the Italians would like more money to be given to Italy, for example, to tackle the effects of immigration. The Eastern Europeans, the Polish and the Hungarians, would want more money to be given to regional development. So there is a competition there between their interests, among other topics.
And let's just look at this a little closer. Pawel, I mean, Russia is a big one, isn't it? There are different attitudes. Hungary is quite Russia-leaning, but Poland not so much.
So Russian issue would not be a problem between Salvini and Orban, but it's a huge issue for Kaczynski. In ECFR, we conduct public opinion polls regularly, and one of the things that we see is that for the voters of Law and Justice Party, Russia is a major threat. They very rarely see Russia as a partner or a friend, while they massively see the US as a crucial ally. Whereas for voters of Fidesz and Lega, this is much different. They are quite often to see either Russia or China as their main partner to have good relations with. They are not necessarily that strongly pro-American, especially voters of Fidesz. And what we see at the level of voters is also seen at the level of political leaders. Actually, we never know what is first, what is the egg and what is the chicken here. But to be sure, for Law and Justice and for several other parties which form part currently of the ECR group, such as Sweden Democrats, the fact that Salvini and Orban have such a strong sympathy towards Putin would sooner or later turn out to be a problem, because foreign policy issues also in the context of the COVID pandemic are becoming increasingly important.
So do you think that might be one of the main reasons, because you were saying before that, the three leaders might just be talking about this forever and never actually form a conservative alliance. Do you think that might be one of the reasons why not?
It remains to be seen. So looking at the political discussion in Poland, soon after the meeting between Salvini, Kaczynski and Orban, a huge discussion was that Kaczynski wants to put Poland in the embrace of partners who are openly pro-Russian. So the opposition was using this Russian issue to discredit the whole initiative. But I wouldn't rule out the possibility of a pragmatic, tactical alliance between the three, whereby opposing the French and German influence on EU politics and impact on discussions about the budget, about migration, would be deemed more important than any differences on foreign policy issues, including on Russia.
Well, let me give Andras the opportunity to address that. So on this issue of Russia and the differing approaches to Russia from Hungary, Italy on the one hand and Poland on the other, what do you think, how impactful is that?
I think after the meeting of the three leaders in Budapest, there was a press conference, and the Prime Minister, the Hungarian Prime Minister, clearly stated that basically there are no obstacles which cannot be overcome, and on most of the principles, both related to domestic policy and foreign policy, the three leaders agreed and see themselves united.
But do you think, I mean, the leaders might say they're united.
Underlined that they have they are committed to transatlantic integration.
Do you think Polish voters will take the same view? For example, will Polish voters feel that it's more important to counter the strength of France and Germany than to keep Russia at arm's length?
I don't think they have to make this choice. I believe if you just look at the statement of the other day of the Visegrad 4 prime ministers condemning Russian aggression on the soil of the Czech Republic, which led to a Czech and Russian diplomatic conflict in last week. I think there's no obstacle which cannot be overcome. Also regarding the EU budget, it's natural. It's a 7-year cycle. Each and every time there are new debates, different member states are competing for EU funds. I think this is natural. They're all looking for their own best interests. Obviously, there will be a decision reached, an agreement reached, as was reached last December about the EU budget and the Next Generation EU package, and then they'll move forward. The main issue is, can you agree on the core principles? There are divisions in every European political family. There was in the EPP, there still is. There is within the Liberals, there is within the Socialists. This is natural. The question is, can you agree on core principles? And I believe these three parties can agree, and that's what they stated.
Doru, do you share that optimism that the three leaders can overcome ideological differences because their shared grievances are seen as stronger, more important?
I think that indeed they have some common ground in what regards their position vis-à-vis some important topics that are being discussed in Brussels. And in the end, foreign policy is one topic, but most of the other policy areas are being dealt with in Brussels by the European Union. Plus, as our Hungarian guest has said, they certainly agree on the transatlantic relations where they have a common ground. So there is a possibility that they would find some level of agreement. And I think, on the other hand, we will see that very soon, because there are some natural deadlines. One deadline is the end of this year, when there will be the reshuffle of the European Parliament. And certainly, if they want to form a new parliamentary group, they would have to do so before that reshuffle in order to be able to exert influence as a political group in the European Parliament. So they're also running a race against time, and we have to see if they're managing to meet this deadline.
OK, so the million-dollar question, Doru, what does this mean for the EU? How worried is Brussels at the idea of this new conservative alliance?
There have been questions of how impactful this alliance will be on the work of the European Parliament. And I think the answer there is not so much, because whether these parties are in the same group or different group, the balance of power overall in the European Parliament doesn't change much. However, what can change is the balance of views overall on the European continent, whether there will be competition between this new, let's say, political network, let's not call it a family yet, and the EPP on the other hand, because on the long term, let's say the elections of 2024, that can indeed result in some impactful outcomes, and we could see different dynamics in the next European Parliament, a continuation of the current fragmentation that we have seen, which would indeed result in a very difficult landscape for negotiations in Brussels.
Pawel, I saw you nodding at the beginning of that. So do you agree? Could this be a worry for the EU, for Brussels?
I wouldn't be too worried, because even if the three leaders found a way of creating an alliance, which in practice would most probably mean Salvini and Orban joining the ranks of the European conservatives and reformists, such a group would become a third largest in the European Parliament, ahead of the Liberals, who are third right now. But I think that their power of attraction would be limited. I just can see other far-right parties like Le Pen or Alternative for Germany ever joining them, because if there are some differences between the three leaders, those differences are much larger vis-a-vis other far-right parties from France and Germany, who are at the same time unlikely to be at the government seat in their countries.
Andras, I mean, presumably you take the opposite view. You feel that this new, if the alliance is formed, if it gains traction, it could gain momentum, it could gain new members.
Yes, it could. I don't understand even your previous question. Why would this be a worry at all to either Brussels or anyone else?
Because you're talking about changing the direction of Brussels,
which were there at the foundation of European integration 60 years ago, and which most of center-right parties defended these values even 10 years ago, 15 years ago. This was completely normal to support families.
But you don't think Brussels would be worried by increasing momentum amongst the further right parties rather than the centrist policies? You're saying you don't understand why that would be a concern to Brussels?
I don't think. For some reason, the right is always portrayed as only having a far wing or an extreme wing, and the left is always considered as being center. I don't think this is the case. The values these leaders expressed after their Budapest meeting were completely moderate, center-right, Christian democratic values. This is what they want. They have a positive vision of the European Union. They have a positive agenda for national sovereignty, for European nation states, for families, which have nothing to do with far right.
I mean, Doru, what it does demonstrate is that there is a gap between the unity that the EU is striving for and individual countries who feel that the EU is interfering with their national values.
Yes, I think that is the key. These parties, where they come in conflict with the, let's say, common consensus now in Brussels, is that they would want more sovereignty to be moved back to the member states, whereas the Conference for the Future of Europe now, the way it is designed, will likely come up with a proposal to do quite the opposite, to give even more powers to the European institutions. So certainly we are going to see a conflict between, let's say, current center-left of the European Parliament and this new alliance to the right, which may transform itself in the main opposition force in the European Union, in which case the dynamics will change more from left versus right towards more federalist versus sovereignist in the European Parliament. This is what I'm saying, that the politics will start looking more like the one that we're seeing in a federation rather than what we have seen until now in the Parliament, which resemble more that of a national parliament.
So, Pawel, last word to you. If you can take a look in your crystal ball, what does this mean for the dynamics of the European Union?
I don't think the dynamic is necessarily changing much because of this initiative. But at the same time, I don't see any problem with those three leaders seeking some form of an alliance. However, as we have heard from the Hungarian colleague, they stress that they do not see themselves as the far right, which means that many of the parties of the far right, like Marine Le Pen's party or Alternative for Deutschland would not be welcome in such an alliance, which would naturally limit the power of this new grouping if it is created within the European Parliament. And actually, to some extent, I believe that for Matteo Salvini, this is one of the main concerns why he should actually join such a group, which will not necessarily be very influential. We all know that part of his electorate, as well as party members, would prefer joining the ranks of the European People's Party, for example, and displaying a more mainstream image. His party is divided. I think that he needs to maintain the allures of being part of a new initiative, but he cannot take such a decision too quickly, because he would basically have to say that one part of his party had more of a reason than another.
Gentlemen, there's plenty more to say, but we don't have the time to say it. Thank you very much indeed for joining me, Andras Laszlo, Doru Frantescu and Pawel Zerka. And you can see more discussion and debate on our YouTube channel. Search for TRT World Roundtable. For now, from me and all the team here, bye-bye. Thanks for watching.